Social license to operate through community engagement. We just had, I had all the bios for the panelists on my computer, and of course, major technical issues, no bios, so I'll just introduce the panel members. So today we have Robert Woolgar from Growler Energy. Robert is our moderator. We have Colleen Paul from Qalipu First Nation. We have Jared Saunders from Newfound Gold. We have Shannon Lewis from Shoreline Aggregates. And we have Robert Greenwood from the province, Government of Newfoundland and Labrador. Over to Robert.
Thank you, Lacey. I must say I'm pretty excited to be here for this first session this morning, and you know, picking up on some of the key messages. You know, Seamus just mentioned then around what we want to do and projects, and I think this session we're starting here today on social license to operate is keyly, it's very important to that, because we talk about projects, we talk about, a will and wanting to do projects and how we want to advance projects. And, if there's something we can kind of take away from this panel session today is, the importance of community engagement, Indigenous stakeholder engagement, other stakeholder engagement. Getting that right early is extremely important. So starting this conference off today with this topic, this conversation, it's something I really want everybody to kind of think about during the week, understand the importance. And we have a very I'll say skilled panel here across Indigenous, government, private industry, and when we get everybody talking from the same script early, and also creating a level of trust and honesty in project developing and advancing projects, I think that's important. One of the things I want to talk about with the mining industry, this is something that was well adopted early in mining, and I think that's a credit to this industry and how that's advanced. Other industries are learning from that, renewable energy, oil and gas. I'm from the renewable energy industry, and but it's also not static, it's dynamic. Things change, communities change, people change. So how do you, as you work through that engagement level and building that trust, and it takes time. And so early engagement's important, but it goes beyond engagement. It's a level of respect and partnership. So one of the things we want to talk about today is how that has evolved, how others have learned from that, the importance, the benefits, but to get to where we need to get to as a province, but also as a country, and some of the elements to what Seamus just mentioned, and the importance of where we're going. This is tremendously important from a social license operating, getting that right, because without this, the other stuff doesn't happen, but it can happen because it is a win-win-win across all levels. And I think what we're going to try today is explore this topic, the importance of this, and I think having this session at the beginning of the conference is important, because I think it's something I'd ask everybody to continue to reflect through the conference and the importance. So we'll get started here now, and I have some questions to start, and then of course we'll have some Q&A from the audience as well. But I'll open this question. Have excused, the lights are literally right in my face. But this question's for the panel, I guess. Based on your experience with social license to operate, what are the key elements of an effective SLO strategy, and what benefits do communities and stakeholders gain when companies work to implement it? And I guess maybe I'll just start here with Colleen to my left and work across the panel.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. From an Indigenous perspective, from the perspective of Qalipu First Nation, I guess the social license to operate is not just about permission. It's about building a relationship of trust, nation-to-nation relationship, honoring Netamu Link, which is the right to sustainable living, and ensuring that spiritual, cultural, and environmental safety. When companies follow these principles, Mi'kmaq communities gain empowerment. We play an important role in the protection of our land and culture, and ultimately we form lasting and equitable partnerships while companies benefit from trust, reduced conflict, and stronger project outcomes.
I think some of the key elements in the social license, I'll break it down into 4 or 5 things. You know, you gotta have good stakeholder engagement at the start, and just because you're talking to someone doesn't mean you have good stakeholder engagement. You know, the next one is you need to have community investment. That's not just coming in and saying, here's some money to do this or some money to do that. That's really incorporating into the community and making an investment in the community for the long term. Then, you know, you also need to look at, gone are the days of just saying, I'm compliant to certain regulations good enough. That's not good enough anymore, so we need to look at ways of always bettering ourselves and being ahead of the game. That boils down into being honest and, you know, transparency. So sometimes the answers aren't easy, or it's not the answer everyone wants. And I think if you get all those right, the part we always don't talk about, you know, I am married to a wonderful lady. I try my best. However, you got to make sure that you know how to, you know, resolve potential conflicts in a marriage. Same thing with a relationship like this. You got to have some form of mechanism to, you know, come to a resolution after a conflict or a disagreement, because you're not always going to be in agreement on every matter.
All good points. So just to add to that a little bit, the spirit of social license to operate, I think, is the interdependence between stakeholders. And you know, a corporation or a project comes into a community, and especially in mining or any other industrial resource-based sector, generally you're coming to take something away from that environment. You're taking minerals, you're taking trees, you're taking fish. So the important part about engaging in social license to operate is that it's a interdependent relationship where the corporation is engaging in the community level. We're bringing something back. We're stakeholders, and you made the point, Seamus, about having skin in the game. So I think that's very relevant when you're talking about good social license to operate, is everybody has to have skin in the game. So as a corporation or a project coming, we want to express that we're committed. There's transparency, there's accountability, but there's also, we're building something together, and that's better social environment, social economic development in our community and our region. So
lots to build on there, and I think actually Seamus mentioned several times a word that I think really weaves its way through all this, is humility. And I think as corporations and people with lots of technical expertise, you come in to develop a resource that clearly has great opportunity and benefit, but the community also has great knowledge and expertise. And the more, a lot of the work I've done since I've been back with the provincial government a couple of years now, looking at demographics and labor market and productivity and rural capacity. And it is increasingly apparent in every sector, in every region, that getting and keeping workers is becoming job one. And if you're not working closely with the community on housing, on amenities, on transportation, on quality of life, you're not going to survive. So going in and knowing that they have knowledge and commitment and buy-in, and you have knowledge and commitment and buy-in, and a lot of my work over the years is on engagement, and I always like the analogy of gears engaging. It takes both sides. So that would kind of be my opening thoughts.
No, thank you. Yeah, just kind of reflecting when I was listening to the answers, and you know, humility comes up, and a thought in this again is back to a strategy. You know, as a developer, don't be afraid to gauge early. People will respect the fact that you don't have all the answers, that you're actually there to learn, to help understand what some of the answers might be, but you're there to build a relationship. You're there out of respect. You know, it's okay not to know exactly what the project looks like, because to be quite frank, you shouldn't before you engage with key stakeholders. So I think, you know, when we talk about a strategy, it's less a strategy than you wouldn't adopt with somebody in your personal life. Just building relationships, just being honest, asking questions, you know, listening, having other people ask you questions. So when we talk strategy, that sounds very that's a very sterile term, but really all we're saying is what would you do in your personal life if you were trying to build a relationship with somebody, and that humility and just being honest and wanting to work together. And what you'll find then is when you have that relationships, and I think, Jared, you just touched on it then too, and you can't be afraid of tough conversations, because there will be tough conversations, because you're not always going to see potentially eye to eye on what it can or should look like. But once you've built those relationships, you can work through those problems. So I think, just kind of reflecting and hearing some key messages there, I think that's a way I'd probably kind of summarize, if you wanted to use the word, a strategy. Start early and build respect and relationships. Another question, I'll direct this one to Colleen and then Rob. Engaging with local stakeholders early is recognized as crucial and successfully implementing an SLO strategy. The mining industry has a broad spectrum of key stakeholders, each with distinct needs. How important is early engagement, and what are the benefits? And I'll apologize if I just helped answer that question in summarizing the last question, but we'll call that a segue or lead-in. So over to you, Colleen.
What Rob said. No, I think ultimately early engagement lays a foundation of trust, even before, like you said, the project is off the ground. And that early engagement empowers stakeholders, such as the Indigenous community in particular, in building that relationship of trust, knowing that their voice is heard, our concerns are heard, and that we are an equal partner in the project or in the development. I would point out that I had the privilege of working with Robert and Growler Energy in a project that's it's really early stages in one of our Mi'kmaq communities over the last few months. And we went into the community, and Robert did this really well, Growler did this really well, that this was just the initial conversation. The project has not started. There's no shovels in the ground, but it allowed that space for the community to come together to ask the questions. What about jobs? What about the water? What about the environment? So it from the very beginning, that built a foundation of trust with the project and the community. So early engagement is critical to the success of any project that's happening within industry. We've seen other projects that have not been very successful, and there have been roadblocks along the way because they did not engage early with communities. So if you want to give the best, put the best foot forward in any project, then early engagement is your best chance for success when it comes to engaging with Indigenous communities.
Just to build on that, too much agreement on this panel so far. We're going to have to stir it up somehow. It's early. I'm full agreement so far. When you do strategic planning, and I've done too much in my life, one of the front ends, or the front end, is planning to plan. And when you think about early engagement, and it's been said well already, you don't dive straight into a strategy. And there's all kinds of acronyms and toolkits that consultants use. But just getting into the community and seeing who is there, the Indigenous organizations, municipalities, Chamber of Commerce, NGOs, citizens, just go to if there's a coffee shop or whatever type of local organization, 50+ club, and there's various out there. Because you will soon start to get a sense of the place, if you don't already have it. And, I've heard panel recently, actually, if you've been to one rural place, you've been to one rural place. Because they're all very different. And so it also is the case again, a lot of the work I've been doing lately, we're all living it. The demographics, not just in rural Newfoundland, this is worldwide increasingly. Fertility rates are dropping everywhere. Labor market is getting tight everywhere. It's even more pronounced in rural areas. And of course, we've had rural to urban migration for years. I'm tail end of the baby boom. We're all, if you're smart, you're retired by now, but you know, I'm too hyper to give it up. Municipalities in our province are relatively underdeveloped compared to the rest of Canada. Canada's underdeveloped compared to the rest of the world. We have very strong provinces and federal government. Of course, Scott there is getting a twitch. He's heard all this here before. Our municipalities are aging out in rural areas. And so increasingly for companies, who do you engage with? How do you engage? And it really varies region by region, but that early engagement is essential to figure out not just who's there now, wants to step up and is able to work on behalf of their community, but also can help you inform where can you actually invest and partner to help them engage as you move into the strategy. So I think that would be really important on early engagement.
Well, thank you. Yeah, because really what we've talked here now is more or less that starting point and the importance of that and what you're trying to build. But we all know projects take a long time. And we talked earlier that this is not static, it's dynamic, and you know, maintaining those relationships and how you do that. So I think that's something, you know, I'd like to look to the panel and Jared and Shannon to answer. So really, you know, the mining industry has been a pioneer in supporting and developing social license to operate. Many projects, we talked about the timelines can span years or even decades. So once you do obtain early a social license, you know, how is that maintained, ensuring meaningful communication, you know, without overwhelming or disengaging the community, and understanding you have to, you know, sustain that, and the importance of, you know, it's not just showing up day one and you know, having some type of informal agreement and everybody's good now for 3 to 5 years. But and I'll direct this to Jared and Shannon. How do you maintain that and understand that these, you know, projects take time, and the re-engagement and ensuring that you less about probably maintaining the social license, but continuing to enhance it?
So I think that's a very relevant question for where I'm sitting in Bay Verte and the dynamic that we've got going on in the Bay Verte region. So I speak to that a little bit. Obviously a very heavily influenced mining jurisdiction with a long history of boom-bust mining cycles, you know, very engaged in forestry, fishery, all the natural resource stuff, but particularly around mining and talking about social license to operate and how to maintain that. Well, we're kind of early stages of even rebuilding all of that. And, you know, we've got several mining projects in the region, Maritime Resources, Firefly, Shoreline, Aggregates, so, you know, 3 industrial players in a region that's been on you know, in a low where we just saw our mining sector take a decline in the last 5 years. Now we're into a resurgence, a major resurgence, where as industry people, we've got to deflate the negative energy that's a little bit in the region with what we just faced, you know, with the decline. So it's going to take a lot of work, but I think we're at the beginning of building our social license to operate as a united group, individually Firefly, Maritime, Shoreline. We've all individually done our piece to create good energy and get our social license and buy-in from the community, but we've also come together united in collaboration with the Chamber of Commerce and our task force that we created, really to work together to address all of our issues in a commonality. But when it comes to the second part of your question about how do you maintain it, I think the biggest thing is having a strategy. And what we're working on is really building that regional strategy through our task force, where all stakeholders, not just the mining industry or the mining sector, are participating in that strategy, so that, you know, we'll all have a plan of where we want to be in 5 years. And having that group where we can engage regularly in building milestones and a dashboard that we can reference to see how we're doing, holds us all accountable, but it also keeps us all engaged when necessary. But you know, the bigger picture is that as a regional strategy, it gives us all stakeholders, including government, educators, industrial players in the mining sector, all sectors, tourism, you know, support industries. We're all together. We're all building a community together. We all got skin in the game. And this is our social license to operate. It's the interdependence of each other to build our social economic community capacity. So I think having that strategy and revisiting it and staying engaged as a group will hold the license together.
Thanks, and yeah, to build on that, I think your strategy is always changing, just like relationships and all that stuff, because it's not just a relationship between one stakeholder. You have many of these different relationships on the go, all at the same time. And just like any relationship, there's going to be ebbs and flows. There's also, you know, the way that we communicate with each other today may not work later. So don't feel afraid to keep asking for constant feedback. You know, when would we like to talk again? How would we like to address? And then even within certain types of stakeholders, there may be different subgroups that need to be, communicated in different ways. Some people, want a town meeting, at a certain frequency, where some people like to have information posted on information boards or something like that, just so that they always feel engaged. So I think social license, is never really complete. You're always building on it more and more, like any good relationship. And there's not a one size fits all. Like you said, one region is different from other. I would even say one stakeholder is different from someone, and it even gets more complex when a stakeholder leader changes out, and then that shakes up the entire relationship again too. So your strategy is always being evaluated and changed, and always getting feedback from all the stakeholders.
No, thank you for that. And what we'll do is I'll pose another question to the panel, then we'll open it up to some Q&A from the audience. But Rob, you mentioned about you go to one rural community and you've been to one. They're all different, right? And each community has its own capacity, and how do you help build capacity? And from a we talk about an organizational strategy, or just how do we ensure that we help communities and help build that local capacity? So the question I guess I'll open up to the panel is, in rural Newfoundland, difficult to pull local communities together in organizations because there could be some organizational capacity or lack of capacity. So what are some ways to enhance that engagement and help build local capacity? And I'll start with Rob.
So I think it's important to get that handle on what the area you're in is composed of, what the organizations are. For many companies, this isn't their expertise. So, you can work with the local college, work with the university. They often have people who are connected. Find out who the organizations are, if the Indigenous organization is a player in that region. There are larger municipalities with some capacity, but there are also provincial organizations. MNL, Municipalities of Newfoundland and Labrador, has great arms and legs throughout the province. There's the community business development centers, there are a whole bunch of them. That there's some capacity in the province, as much as it's getting weaker, in my opinion. As you get a handle on that, you can then start to learn who the individuals are, who are the gatekeepers, who are the champions, who are the opponents. And I'm a big fan of facilitation. So I don't know how anything gets done without someone facilitating meetings or diverse perspectives. I like flip charts and get things on the wall so that you can actually, where are we actually agreeing? Where are we actually not agreeing? Where are the things that we don't know? It's the old Rumsfeld kind of line. What we know, what we know, we don't know, what we don't know. The other one that's really key these days, I heard recently, things we know that we don't want to admit. Get that up on the wall and have some conversation. And look for creative solutions amongst the group. And it doesn't have to be all at once, some progress in the right direction. But the more people contribute to that, they have a sense of ownership. You know, Community Development 101, I learned from Dave Curran many years ago. If you want something to work in a community, you have to give it away. Because if you try to own it and hold it and control it, people can see through that. You have a job to do, you have a project, and the goal is really clear. But if you need housing, if you need workers, if you need transportation, if you need political support, etc., you need them also. And they have ideas, and so the more you allow that exchange of ideas, and then the final thing I'd say for now is if you're investing, it's great to support the summer festival or to contribute to a snowplow for the municipality, or there's lots of stuff you can do. Invest in capacity also. Help them hire a consultant or hire, most rural municipalities have a staff person who works a day a week. I mean, how do you expect? There's some great volunteers, but again, they're all getting older. So how do you expect to get engagement if there's not some horsepower, human resources? So think about investing in those ways, and some of it gets done, but I think we need a lot more of it.
Great points. I really go back to, how do you maintain or how do you get that social license, okay? So when we're seeing new corporations, new projects come into the community, or if you're already an operator in a community, I think it's so important that, at all levels, from top down, bottom up, that the idealism in the company is to be engaged in your community building, right? So your philosophy is that we're not just a corporation to make money, but we're investing in the community. And you go back to capacity building or asset building in a community. That's got to be instilled in the corporation. You have to have people inside of our companies that are investing in the community. They're volunteering in the minor hockey associations. They're participating with their kids in the community. They're on the volunteer library board. They're on the rec commission. And why that's critical item is because in today's environment where we live, and I'm sure it's the same in the rest of Newfoundland and Canada, where resources in the volunteer sector are so limited, communities are suffering because they don't have those resources as volunteers. So as corporations or project leaders, if we can instill the social responsibility to our employees or our team, be engaged, get engaged. And it doesn't matter what, but be engaged in something in your community. Then the employees are going to see that investment of their energy. The town sees that, the community sees that. We're instrumental in all aspects of our community. That's social license from what I can see in maintaining it. And I think we've come a very long way in Baber in the region to start rebuilding that. And I got to say, largely, there's been a little bit of a gray area, a lot of fog over us for the last decade. It hasn't been all positive energy in our community for all the same reasons that every community in these places of that size. Capacity, infrastructure, volunteers, community capacity. Everything is, people are a little bit depressed, to be, quite frank about it. So when you see corporations coming in, I'll take Firefly Maritime Shoreline, for example, where we see optimism in our industry. We have to bring that optimism and that energy back to the community. And we're trying to be the kickstarter of rebuilding that change in focus, that positive energy building in the community, so that we start within our social license to operate, and we can instill that investment of our energy, our time, our money, our resources in the community. We'll build a community. And that's the key, is keeping people engaged in a positive way. We're all here together building. I just think that's
Thank you, gentlemen. I love how we talked about investing long-term, investing in the community and all that stuff. And one thing that I also like to put out there is, we also have to help the community understand the work that we're doing. As a proponent, we should be somewhat subject matter experts in it. There's nothing worse than, flooding your stakeholders or whatever with, studies are not getting any easier to read and they're not getting any shorter, and the important piece of information may be in table 69 on page 385. So, building capacity in the community to go in when there's a report or study done, to break that down into what is meaningful for them and help them understand and say, look, I'll bring in a subject matter expert in X to explain it to you, so then you can get that information out in the community.
Yeah. I love that, and I would agree with all of the statements so far on the panel. Sorry. So enhancing engagement and building capacity requires a focus on partnership, inclusion, and long-term investment in community. So we see benefits to community when we prioritize local employment. So getting back to the early stages of building that relationship, from our perspective, is having that opportunity to engage with industry in having ample time to train up our people to meet the needs of the project, of the industry requirement. Supporting community-led initiatives is also very important from our perspective. Fostering transparent two-way communication. Industry projects hiring Indigenous liaison officers to help support your project. You know, our industry, our Indigenous liaison officers most often already have that relationship of trust built with communities. So having them work in partnership with your projects would be beneficial. Community meetings, digital platforms, all of those tools that are being used are great. And in short, I would close with meaningful engagement in mining is about working with and not for communities. Supporting our capacity to lead and benefit from and guide, we want to help guide that development on our own terms and meet you where you are. He likes to talk a lot.
Yeah, that's right. I'll take 2 mics. No, that was all great points. And just looking at the time, we have 10 minutes left, so maybe we can open it up to questions from the audience. And maybe if you have a question, you can also direct it to the panel member you would like to answer that question, just to help with the time we have remaining. So is there any questions from the audience? You're not going to get my mic, Steve.
Hi, Steve Rowe with SCM here. Great conversation here this morning, guys. Really appreciate it. We're playing this game too. So, and I hear like a common theme of early engagement, but just wondering if there's what tools or techniques or strategies have you used to increase engagement, in particular where maybe a party or stakeholder might be a little more quiet or silent in the negotiation. So it's not directed at anyone, but directed at anybody, no one in particular, but just anybody who has something to comment on that.
I'll start because I have the mic. How's that? I actually find, you have to figure out, just like a relationship, what stakeholders like, how best, how we discuss is going to be different than how myself and Mr. Smith down the road discusses and all that stuff, But also just finding different ways of getting your information out. One of the tricks that I used, not too long ago, we were having some lower turnouts to some community meetings, was we sent a postcard to the, just the original mail, stuck a stamp on it, sent around to every house and all that stuff. Just to get the information out there, and it was amazing the difference in turnout, just because the demographics that you're handling at that specific location was a little different, Not everyone is on Facebook or whatever kids use these days, or what's on the go. So we just said, let's try something old-fashioned, start licking stamps and sticking them on postcards.
It all comes down to relationship building, right? So just think about it. So we're connecting this story, but I can't get into it here because it's too long. But just think, if you're a new project, you're coming into a brand new community, no one knows who you are, and you're, say, mining sector or some project that's, if somebody might think you're taking something away, like resources or trees or fishing, First thing is they're going to have their backup for Newfoundland. You're coming into a small town, Newfoundland. You're a stranger. We're very friendly people, but if you're coming in from corporate, what do you want? So you're just finding the connection that you're on common ground, that you're there to be a part of the community, and that's the thing. It's relationship building. So the other thing is getting the conversation started. So as soon as you can shake somebody's hand, you can say, "Listen, there's a commonality here. We're on the same page," and something. People start to relax. So and then being able to engage in the conversation. For us, we had to really take it in task and hold some, round tables and round tables and round tables. And early on, we never had a lot of participation. Kept at it to make sure people saw that we were committed to getting the conversation moving. And then, some more people come and you get engaged and more people come. So relationship building, commonality, and that you're there to do something together. I think that's a good start.
Just build on that a little bit, and the relationship building is key. The thing I'd emphasize at the beginning, especially if you're old and crotchety like me, you've got a network around the province, you got people you can call, you can leverage that. But if it's a new project, a new thing, so this stuff is a contact sport, and there's nothing that pays like showing up in a community, going to the town office, calling ahead, speak to the mayor, the Indigenous leadership, the Chamber of Commerce, the 50+ Club, you name it, and it counts, I know, in rural Newfoundland and Labrador to show up and have that initial chat, find out who's willing and able to be a champion, and then when you want to have the community follow up bigger sessions, utilize those gatekeepers as the ones who spread it to their network, so you're not going in cold. But the other thing I'd put with that, you got to be bloody persistent. People have their lives, social media, TV, back at the cabin, depending on the age profile, people. So if it matters and you need people to show up, you got to do the RSVP, you got to keep track of it. I was out in Bayvert recently, the initial, a week ahead of time. There were probably 10 people signed up. Well, get out of the friggin' way, buddy. And by the end of it, there were about 40 from a whole network of nearby. And that's sweat and persistence and working your network. But once the people are in the room, it's, if you're sincere and you facilitate well, it's magic. And they're asking you to come back. They haven't yet, but they did.
The invitation's in the mail, Rob.
Thank you. I think acknowledging that Indigenous rights exist within the province of Newfoundland with two federally recognized First Nations bands here on the island, which is Qalipu and Meowpket. As our chief would always say, our door is always open for business. We are always looking for partnerships, opportunities to advance our people with respect to employment and social development across all of our communities. So I would encourage any industry partner or potential industry partner to always reach out, and we will always be willing to have that conversation.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Do you have time for one
Yeah,
more?
we've got time for one more question. So maybe what I'd ask our panelists is if somebody wanted to take this question, or if everybody wanted to answer maybe just a couple of quick points to help answer the question to keep us on time. Thank you.
Sure. Mine was going to be a bit about the unique nature of mining, in the sense that from the time of developing or discovering that there's something in the ground, the time it takes to advance that discovery through to feasibility, through to building a mine, you're likely to go through a whole bunch of companies, from the initial prospector to the first company gets taken out, there's a joint venture, and it keeps going all the way through. So how do you overcome the fatigue of the community in dealing with a whole bunch of different players, is part one. And then part two is, in industry, now knowing that we're all held to this standard and knowing it's such a small community, how do you influence your fellow companies to good behavior, because you know that project could be your project or someday, and so you're going to inherit good or bad behavior from the people who came before you?
No, that's an excellent question, and maybe what I could do is ask Jared or Shannon to take this one as I guess a developer, and just help to answer that question.
That's a tough question. It's very tough because you take a mining project, like, I can only go back to Bay Verde. It's like, Pine Cove was coming out. It's 20 years from exploration to commercialization. And there's a lot of ups and downs in that, and a lot of people change hands. And it's tough because from a community aspect, you're riding that wave. You're hearing, oh, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. And then what happens, it doesn't happen, or it's delayed. And then when somebody serious comes in, and just Firefly's an example, an awesome example, because they've got a major project underway, and from a community perspective, it's like, is that still going to happen? Is that really going to happen? Because they've rode that wave just before. So I think from the new player coming in, they've done a fantastic job. But it's for anybody coming in that's that newer player, that new stakeholder, is getting in and pushing hard and trying to build that credibility that this is a real project, or this is evolving. We're not what you've experienced in the past, but this is how we plan on doing it. Net engagement, that's that social license. That's a tough question, and it's a lot of work. A lot of work.
Thanks. Yeah, I honestly don't think there's any one recipe for it. It's like relationships. There's ebbs and flows. There's going to be times when you're doing a lot more engagement. There's a lot is all about being connected to your stakeholders so they can get a hold of you when they do have a question. And you have to be brutally honest, even though sometimes it's uncomfortable. If there's a delay for a certain reason, or a decision has to be made, just be honest, because people would much rather you be honest with them, and in the long term that will pay off much better than if you just skirt around or give a half answer, because people see through that all the time. So I think just be honest, and then build that relationships, and yes, it does take a long time.
I do have a quick one on that. Of course. Just a quick thought. Using engagement along the process helps with that continuity. And I've worked in government a lot of years and suffered when ministers change and governments change, and you have a great initiative, and then the new crowd come in, and that was them, this is us, and all that other stuff does. And I worked with Doug House for a lot of years, and Doug looked at the Irish Social Partnership, and part of it, it's on topic, because it's about engaging the players. In your case, it's the mining company that's changing, which is a key player for that project. But if you have the Indigenous organization, the municipalities, the 50+ Club, the various NGOs who know it matters and have been part of the conversation, they will help with the continuity down the line and help police you in a good way. There's an African proverb, supposedly, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that engagement becomes part of the solution.
No, thank you. Just to sum up, the clock is at 0. I was waiting to see what would happen, so the stage hasn't opened up, but let's bring it to a close. Maybe what I'll do is ask the panelists just very quickly a key point, and I'll just start off by saying I think this is a very important topic. It's a very important topic to start this conference with, and I would encourage everybody to think about this in your conversations this week, and the importance of social license to operate. So I'd like to thank the questions and the panel, and I'll just ask the panel to close this topic expeditiously. So just a key point for the audience on what you want them to remember during the week on this topic.
I think I'm good.
You're good? Any last thoughts, Colleen? Okay, we'll ask Colleen to close it.
Just not a last thought, but a last statement. Just to keep in mind that true social license isn't just about early meetings or benefit agreements. It's about building the relationship for the entire life of the project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are at refreshment break time, so that is next door. Thank you to the panel. There were excellent bios, by the way, and as you can tell, don't even need to read them because they shone through anyway. All right, thank you guys. We will reconvene here in 20 minutes. No, 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock, thank you.